Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning. Happy New Year. I've been traveling through Malaysia, through Penang, and taught a retreat in Wisdom Park. Went to many Buddhist groups and met many kind people. So I feel this trip to Malaysia, I feel quite connected in a way that I haven't before, in a very lovely way. So thank you to everyone for being so hospitable and kind and interested in the Dhamma. So I was pondering what I might like to say today, and obviously I want to offer blessings for the new year, and then I was pondering what are blessings. So obviously I wish you good health and prosperity, but then good health and prosperity is meaningless without friendship. So I wish you kalyanamitta, spiritual friendships. But then good health, prosperity, and friendship is meaningless unless there's purpose in life. So I wish you purpose. And what is purpose in our lives? It seems to me there's sort of two avenues of meaningfulness in life. One is the social and one is the inner, and they're not mutually independent. They reinforce and help each other. So I've been in Thailand and in Singapore and here in Malaysia. I've heard about many kind of philanthropic and humanitarian efforts that Buddhist groups do. My own situation in Canada, Buddhism is so very small that, you know, we're a small handful of people, so there aren't the resources for those kinds of humanitarian works. So coming to Southeast Asia and seeing public health initiatives, Firefly people in Singapore building schools in Laos, and then this place. I mean, this is magnificent. There's nothing like this in Canada. So I think if you measure a country by its spiritual, rather than GDP, you measure it by its spiritual aspiration, I think you're far ahead of Canada in this sense. So this kind of work to create this space and I was just hearing about the Sunday schools you have from age 4 to 17, and now there are third generation people coming here. It's so very heartwarming to know. And so that's the social part of our lives. And it's more than just dana. It is a kind of commitment to the well-being of our environment, the well-being of our societies and families. And this is meaningful. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, but it gives the heart some sense of purpose and direction. So also for myself, that's my life has been involved very much in starting monasteries and trying to create sanghas and communities in different kind of countries. And now I'm 76 years old, and reflecting on that is obviously a very happy memory. Although at times it was not a happy thing going on, the complexities and conflicts that we have as we try to build places. And then the inner meaning, you know, what is, we're all working on that. If we didn't have some kind of inner purpose and inner meaning, then it would just be social activism. And social activism without a dharma of understanding your mind usually leads to burnout or bitterness, even cynicism. I've seen that with social workers who are very idealistic, and they are engaged in social welfare initiatives. But when they don't have Dhamma, they can very easily become kind of sour and bitter, which is kind of a sad thing. Not necessarily. So in kind of thinking through, what blessings I might hope for you, and one of the blessings I would hope for you is gratitude. Usually we don't say, I wish you gratitude. We don't talk in that way. But if you contemplate it, what a important and liberating attitude gratitude is. And gratitude is directly against tanha, against craving. And making that conscious is a huge part of our lives, isn't it? When we share merit, when we think of our elders. I've been thinking a lot about Sian Ma's mom, Madame Luang, and the funeral that's going on right now. And I was thinking about this wonderful thing called mother. Like as contemplating my own mom and other moms, that like a mother carries her child through the term of pregnancy. As a man, I can't even imagine what that's about. I mean, I don't have access to that. Has all kinds of morning sickness and fear of I don't know. And then there's the birthing, and how, what that is, what that means. And then there's the love that a mother gives, and nourishes the child from her own body, gives the child language, gives a child motor skills, gives a child social skills, and then forgives them when they're teenagers. Because as a teenager, I don't think I was a very fun guy to be with. So, when I reflect on, in terms of parents, my mom and dad, if I remember that, then there's a huge sense of joy and gratitude for their well-being. And gratitude is an important part of the liberated heart, isn't it? It's not trivial. It's directly against the kind of craving mind. So whatever ways in this new year, as we go into this following year, when we enter it with a sense of gratitude that we have this place, we have good minds, we have reflective minds, we have moral integrity, we have kalyanamitta, huge things in the world. We don't have warfare. We're not in Gaza. We're not in a flood zone. Does KL flood? It didn't flood yesterday, so all the different situations that could take place, here we are. We're safe. We trust each other. We're encouraging each other. It's kalyanamitta. We have teachers, and we have the intelligence to contemplate. So I wish you gratitude. And then, then what else would I wish you? Well, so many things, really. I wish you the skills of being a good citizen, the skills of work, the skills of craft, the skills of home economics, the skills of financial management, the skills of, like I think a lot about skills, because I enjoy making furniture and weaving. That's the one thing I miss when I travel, is work. I want to get my hands on something, on some tools, and make something. But the development of skill is one of the things we human beings can do, because we have memories, we have intelligence, we know how to solve problems, and then the materials that we are working with present challenges, and then we go into those challenges with intelligence and cause and effect wisdom, and then slowly, 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 we develop the capacity to do things well. Whether it's being a parent, I don't think, does anyone get any instruction booklets when they have their first child? Here's how you do it, good luck. So you don't know. I've never been a parent, but you don't know how to do this, and somehow you learn and you try and you learn and you try and you develop skills. And the contemplative life or the meditative life is very much skill-based. And the kind of basic skill I would say that we're trying to cultivate is the skill of awakening to the way things are. And that sounds very, very ordinary, but quite often we can be so caught up with our thoughts and our emotions and our problems that we forget to just simply awaken to this present moment. And if I listen to Luang Por Sumedho's talks a lot now, I guess some of you do too. He's publishing quite a few talks on YouTube, and you notice how he's always saying it's like this. Now, in some way, that's a tautology. It's like this, of course. How else could it be? So it doesn't take much to figure that out. But I think what he's asking us to do is when we say it's like this, to really notice what it's like, to stop in the present moment and awaken in silence to this moment the way it is. And that's what I would say is refuge in Buddha, refuge in the awakened mind rather than a refuge in a kind of cultural thing. And when we do that, it's like this, and we stop and we listen and we know, then what do we know? We know Dharma, the way things are. Not Dharma as doctrine, but as existential experience. Right now I feel this way. And from that, I would say that is right understanding. Not understanding in a way of the texts, which is important, but understanding in the way of my present moment experience. And when we do that, when we remember to do that, and we train to do that, and we get a skill of doing that, then that capacity to awaken begins to interrupt the delusions of the mind, our worries and our self-doubts and resentments that we have, and all these different ways that we suffer as human beings. As we awaken to them, we see that I am not this anger, I am not this fear, I am not this self-doubt, I am not this worry. These are objects that are part of Dhamma, part of nature. Luang Por Sumedho has, he's my teacher, and I had the good fortune to be with him since 1975 when we started Wat Nana Chat, and he realized that there were so many Western monks coming to Ajahn Chah that we needed a monastery that was suited to Westerners. So we started Wat Nana Chat, and when he began to teach as an abbot, he tried to imitate Luang Por Chah, and after a while he realized, well, I'm not Luang Por Chah. I express myself in a different way. And then he started to express himself in his own way. And there was one incident where he had, I was there, Lampapasana was there. Was he there the first year? And anyway, some senior monks. And we were quite young and judgmental. And we all knew how to do it better than him. So the poor man, he's trying to lead this community of conceited Westerners who know how to do it, and we'll do it this way and do it that way. And he says, listen, we do it this way. You just listen. And then he just went back to, now is the knowing. Rather than kind of doing anything fancy, he just constantly throughout his, as I've known him as a teacher, he'd always emphasize that. He would say it different ways. He said, now is the knowing, or consciousness is the escape hatch. Now he says it's like this. And what I think he's pointing to is, he's pointing to the gateway to true peace, the gateway to silence, the gateway to the unconditioned. Because when our attention is preoccupied with the conditioned realm of our bodily feelings, our social responsibilities, our thoughts, the past and the future, we need to be engaged in that, obviously. We have no choice. But is that all there is? Is there simply a life of constant engagement and struggle with samsara? Now, we need to do that well. If we don't do that well, we get overwhelmed by it. but samsara. Just throw it out the window, maybe. Okay, no problem. So back to the theme. So if we're like that, let's say that phone grabs my attention, right? And I'm trying to focus on giving a talk, and then, no offense, you created a good example for me. You're very helpful, actually. So this is the objective world of sound, bodily feeling, memory, emotion. These are all objects that come and go through consciousness. And we need to deal with that well. We need to understand our emotions. We need to understand our social responsibilities. But is Buddhism just a kind of psychological teaching? Is it just about being a psychologically more grounded person? It is that. It is about that, but I would say that's not the only thing. Is it just a social philosophy of good works and moral living and generous impulses? It is that too. But I would say that our social engagements and the way we live socially and our emotional maturity that we're trying to develop as human beings is a foundation for something more profound. And that is the language that the Buddha gives us in the suttas which talk about liberation and end of suffering. My own models of the teachings kind of come from the story of a previous Buddha who, the story of the palace where Gautama goes out and sees an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a sadhu. And that's the story of our existence, that we suffer old age, sickness, and death. We also live in joy and love. We have both of those. But Siddhartha is discontented. He has a kind of doubt. He's accomplished. He's gifted. He has doesn't seem to have any psychological or economic problems. And yet there's doubt. So there's something in that story about meaning. This isn't enough. This good life that I'm living isn't sufficient. And then and what's significant about that story for me is that when he sees the sadhu, he asks Channa, "Who is that fellow?" Channa says, "Well, that's a sadhu. He's seeking the deathless. He's seeking liberation from suffering." And that, to me, is pretty key about the meaning of the teaching. That the whole purpose of the inner teaching and the deeper teaching is to realize what the Buddha eventually realized. And sometimes in Buddhism, I'm surprised at how often we talk about rebirth. And I'm personally, I've never been interested in rebirth. I'm more interested in the Buddha's enlightenment. And if you think about it, the Four Noble Truths don't talk about the kind of enlightenment you'll get by getting rid of suffering. It does kind of talk about the end of rebirth, but that can be a very nihilistic way of looking at the teaching. Like, I don't want to get born again, which is like pretty negative. But actually the teaching around liberation is very, very positive. There is peace. There is love. There are the Brahma Viharas that we can aspire to. So that has been, that story has always been very kind of fundamental to my own aspiration. So the Buddha's setting forth as an ascetic then he's not a rejection of family life, I don't think, although, sometimes Westerners, they hear that story and they get very critical. Oh, the Buddha deserted his wife. And but he had an extended family, and then he came back and she became enlightened. So there's more to the story than that. But the story goes that the Buddha did this for the well-being of all beings. So enlightenment isn't selfish. It's not like, I'm just trying to get my own enlightenment. You figure out your own enlightenment. It's your problem. It's not my problem. It's actually the best thing we can do for humanity, really is, because then all all our resources, our inner resources, become available to all humanity. So when Luang Por Sumedho says it's like this, to me he's pointing to the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, the deathless, which is how the Nibbana Sutta talks about it. There is the unborn. And what is unborn? What does not begin and end? And you can only touch that by being silent. If attention is always in thought, trying to figure things out in analysis, or always in the emotional world, or always just caught up with whatever distractions we have, our attention is not available for the gateway, for the realization of peace. So my sense of it is we're not trying to get anything or trying to get rid of anything. We're trying to kind of step into the background of awareness and let the flow of consciousness come and go, which isn't a becoming or a getting rid of. It's more like an attitude, and we call that attitude awake. And that, we can all do that. In any given moment, you can awaken to the way things are and bring your mind to silence. But then sustaining that's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. So one of the things I would wish for you in this new year is a good morning meditation practice. That you cultivate this sense of the awakened mind every morning. And I as a monk, when I went to Wat Pah Pong, how often did I really want to go to meditation? It was painful, the mosquitoes were biting, it was super hot, I wasn't used to heat. So in all, it was usually an unpleasant experience. And people sometimes romanticize, oh, you were with Ajahn Chah, that must have been wonderful. Sometimes, but oftentimes it was miserable. And but Luang Por Chah would say, if you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. And that I began to understand that meditation wasn't having a happy experience or even a peaceful experience, that it was developing witnessing to the way things are, be it good, bad, and indifferent, and living in that environment, which was very foreign to me, but very kind, very loving and caring, but still, I felt like an alien oftentimes. Being in that environment, it just required having to go out of a sense of honor, not it wasn't the police state, but out of a sense of honor, just day in and day out, going and watching the mind with its complaining and its boredom, and then its highs and lows, and all the time the emphasis was on puru, or be the knowing, be the knowing, be the knowing. And that became the dominant thing. Because if I just meditated every now and then, when I wanted to meditate, that wouldn't give very good results. So if your meditation makes you peaceful, then accept it. If your meditation doesn't make you peaceful, then accept it. Luang Por Chah would emphasize these kinds of attitudes. And then over time, of course, what began to be more dominant was the very sense of knowing, rather than the particular experience that I was having. When I first started, the experience was like sitting on concrete floors was very difficult, and I wasn't very flexible, and that took a long time, and then the food was difficult, but all the time, Luang Por Chah is emphasizing be the knowing, puru. So through the fluctuation of the difficulties and the highs and lows and being inspired by Ajahn Chah, the dominant theme was always be the knowing, be the knowing, be the knowing, be the witness, be the witness. And that began to take me to the doorway of silence. Whereas if I was just concerned about quality of experience, which because when I went to Wat Pah Pong, I had no meditation experience, never done a retreat, didn't even have a meditation practice. For some reason, I just wanted to be a monk. And then bang. And the only instruction Luang Por Chah would give, he said, watch your breath. Thanks. Like you'd think he'd give you a really fancy technique. You're a great master, do this, that, and then you'll get enlightened. He said, no, be patient. Hang in there. Give it 5 years, you might feel better. So there was just no guarantee. But he was right. because I didn't have a very trained mind. I didn't have a very trained emotional heart, but I had a willingness, and I had a determination. I had a fabulous teacher, and then Luang Por Sumedho. So I had encouragement. And then the encouragement was really not around the experience. It wasn't like emphasizing some deep, deep experience of samadhi or deep, deep insights where, stream entry and all these kinds of things we talk about. Never talk about that. States of jhana, I'll never talk about that. It was always like, be the knowing, be the knowing, be the knowing. And so it was never about becoming. It was more like endure and know the way things are. And that resonated with me, because to me the teaching was a Kalika Dhamma, and the references to time have always been important for me, because if it's a Kalika Dhamma, it's not a matter of time. It can't be something I build up and get tomorrow. That just didn't make any sense to me. And if it's about even getting rid of something now to achieve something later, that didn't make any sense to me. And then also bhava and vibhava tanha, the whole sense of becoming something, becoming enlightened even, that also didn't make sense to me. And then, like I was saying the other day, Luang Por Chah once was asked, how old are you? And you've probably read this. He says, I have no age. When you think you're born, you're already making a problem. I said, wow. Okay, now, and that always referred to a Kalika Dhamma, here and now. And what is here and now is experience, which is coming and going, but there's also the knowing. Yeah, okay, trust in that. So I began, through my teacher's encouragement, a lot from Luang Por Sumedho, just trust and awareness, trust and awareness. Yeah, but my mind's full of this and full of that, and I should be getting this and I should be getting that. No, trust and awareness, let go of craving. And that attitude has paid dividends for me, if I can give an economic kind of analogy, and it does work. But early on, it seemed kind of hopeless, because I had an untrained mind, and it didn't have the skills of contemplative crafts and in inner tranquility. But I had a vehicle. So I kind of segued away from my suggestion you do a morning practice. Now, lay folk, you don't have you have Kalyanamitta here, but you don't have the discipline of a monastery. So it's actually much more difficult for a lay person to have the self-discipline. Maybe your family's not into it, or maybe they are, but so that's it's not easy. But morning practice is like I think evenings, most people I think are so tired, they just want to veg out, just watch Netflix and forget about the world or something. So you have to be kind of reasonable in what kind of works for you. And morning, I think, is your best shot, where you develop this kind of attitude where it doesn't really matter what you're experiencing. It's not really about a good or bad meditation, it's about the knowing. Be the awareness, so you feel the meditation is going well. This is a good meditation, fine. This is a bad meditation, fine. All the time now is the knowing. And that does take you to the doorway. I often use this kind of analogy that you have a doorway back there. I guess that's what Kilawar means, exit. Clever, huh? But when you open those doors, that's a kind of gateway both to this space and to the outer space, isn't it? And that's what awareness is. Awareness accesses the conditioned realm of emotions and thoughts, where most of our attention is. But also, if you let go of attachment and fascination with objects, suddenly awareness begins to notice the background, which is silence, which is deep, deep silence. And you can't notice that if you're busy in the world of thought, in the world of emotion. Now, we're not trying to get rid of thought, because getting rid of thought is still being involved with the object. That's one of the problems I think meditators have. They try to meditate on an object in order to get rid of thinking, but you're still preoccupied with the objective world. So I think what needs to happen is to see thought as an object. It's hard to do. So morning meditations are really the time where you can cultivate this sense of the doorway. Awareness is a doorway, and trust in that. So the analogy which I use a lot is the foreground and the background. So for me now, visual perception, you sitting there, is the foreground. And then the sound of the air conditioning is the foreground. And then my own ankle, feelings in my ankles are the foreground. And maybe the phone ringing becomes a kind of dominant foreground, draws me more. But all those are just experiences, the khandhas, if you like, in the Pali, that are coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, according to cause conditions. But awareness isn't the same. Awareness is not a phenomenon. It's not an object. I've been saying this for the last 20 talks, so those who have heard my last 20 talks, please forgive me. But I've been saying, is awareness chocolate or vanilla? Doesn't work, does it? Is awareness Malaysian or Canadian? Doesn't compute. Is awareness a magnolia or a rose? Doesn't work. Is awareness, is it big or small? Like how big is awareness? Is it like 10 cubic meters? Doesn't work. So when you start to actually contemplate what awareness is, you realize it's not an object, and yet it is an experience. We have the experience of awareness, but we cannot find an object called awareness, because awareness is the background. It's what makes all of this possible. If you didn't have awareness, you wouldn't know the difference between hot and cold, between sound and bodily feeling. So as you start to touch, one part of Sameta has always encouraged me to actually contemplate awareness rather than the objects of awareness. Usually you don't do that. You're just kind of trying to get the objects right, which is okay. And he just has encouraged me for so many years. So he'd use analogies of space and form. So you have, like in this room, you have space. And what would you need to do to notice space? Well, you need to take your attention away from objects. So now I see this gentleman, and I see a person back there, and I see the camera, I see the clock. So my mind is attentive to all these objects. What would I need to do to notice the space? I'd have to relax my mind away from objects, away from sound. Although the objects, I'm sorry, the objects are still there. You're not getting rid of them. But now you're reflecting on something much more subtle. Much more subtle is the awareness itself. And so the analogy you find throughout Buddhism is space and form. So then you could think of awareness as conscious space, maybe, if you want to put language to it. But you cannot find it as an object. You cannot, like if I say to you, find awareness, it doesn't work, and yet there is awareness. And that's why, say Lompa would say, Sameta might say, be the knowing, or be awareness, that kind of language. So then if you take that logic and you begin to contemplate that, and you start to develop a morning meditation where the world isn't so compelling and pushing you to, because once the world starts, you just have to deal with it. Traffic and balanced books and the whole 9 yards. So if you can have a kind of a pause in your life in the morning and then begin to contemplate this kind of background, foreground, you begin to touch the peace of the mind. Not because you've manipulated the conditions to get peace, but you've managed to not grasp the conditions to find the natural peace, which is the background of our human possibility. It's quite wonderful. And it's very subtle. It's like, so the attention goes out, right? And then I know that, okay, my attention goes out. And if I just listen, that changes. But what's unchanging? Something in that experience of changing sound didn't change, and that's awareness. So that's one of the things I play around with on retreats. I ask people, toggle between two sense bases. Take sound. So I could do this with me. Listen to sound. Now what do you have to do to listen? You have to stop thinking. So really listen. Now notice the changing nature of sound. What's unchanging? Now feel your body touching the ground. Just feel the weight again. Feel it, which means you have to let go of thinking. Really feel the body. Notice the body. And notice that the body is in awareness. Go back to sound. Be silent. Notice that sound is in awareness. Body, sound are in awareness. Awareness is the space of consciousness. So you can touch this silence all the time. You can touch it all the time. And once you start to do that, it's a great relief. Because you don't have to get anything or get rid of anything. You just have to remember to awaken. So as I was starting this little piece, that's what I really wish for you, huh? The awakened mind. And that's very, very possible. Trusting. Now, why? Once you understand that, I was reading the third Zen patriarch's piece, the Shin Ming. Is that how we pronounce it? Yeah. Beautiful piece. Yeah? The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. They use the Tao. I think they use the Tao for that. And the great way is awareness for those who have no preferences. And preference is the mind which is going out all the time. Now we have preferences. I like coffee more than I like tea. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not about that. But if we're going to discover the silence of the mind, we have to see that it can't be the whole preferential mind, the desire mind. And so desire makes a lot of sense. Why are we so down on tanha? It's not that tanha is evil. To want to be successful, it's natural. And to not want pain, that's natural. So there's nothing really wrong with tanha, but the tanha itself is about objects and the craving for objects. So, like aesthetically, we're building a monastery. I would like a pretty monastery. I don't want to build a garbage mound, right? So I have aesthetic preferences. And then we make effort to make it beautiful. So we call on joy a nice meditative space or whatever. And that's the realm of wanting. But that's not immoral. That's not wrong. I'm not going to go to hell for that, I hope. Right? But it's just realizing that tanha, because it's about objects, is about the relative world of things. And this is not about tanha. It's not about getting something. It's about noticing what is. And so then you begin to understand the Buddha's references to tanha weren't just about morality. It is about morality and generosity, but it's more than that. It's like, don't look for the unconditioned in conditions. Don't look for the deathless in that which is bound by birth and death. Seek the unconditioned in the background, in the silence. So I'm Lompa Sameta, one of the things about my great love of him is right from the get-go, from when I knew him, from Chithurst and before that at Wat Nanachat in Thailand, he's always made that the cornerstone of his teaching. And then everything else, dependent origination, Four Noble Truths, has always, to me, seemed to be referenced to that. He uses the Four Noble Truths a lot, as you know, and that's a fabulous teaching. And the thing about suffering, it's just that we're looking in the wrong place. We're looking for the background in the foreground. Once we understand that, then I think our activity in the foreground is actually quite beautiful. I think that's where the Brahma Viharas naturally manifest, because when you discover the peace of your own human potential, which is there, then you really, the wanting mind just begins to fall away, because why would you want to spoil that with distractions? And then in that space of availability, you become available. What naturally arises are metta, goodwill, compassion, joy, peacefulness. These are natural possibilities when the human mind isn't caught up in egotistical things. Sometimes I think about, look, so what would an Arahant look like? Would he be a Malaysian, or would he be or Thai? Would he have a big nose like mine, or a small nose like yours? Or, what would he look like? And he would look like the Brahma Viharas, wouldn't he? Wouldn't that kind of just be natural? And we see that in the great beings that we can contact. Say, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I've had a good chance to hear his talks and be with him, and he is beautiful being, just like emanating compassion. And yeah, you look at that, it's actually, yeah, that's very natural to him, and inspiring. So I wish you the Brahma Viharas. May the Brahma Viharas be your abiding for this year and for many years to come. So I'll finish with that reflection.
Thank you, Luang Po, for your insightful Dhamma teaching. Probably we have just one question from the floor, if there's any.
Venerable Sir, to be a witness or to be the knowing on emotions and also on the daily life, how deep should you actually dwell into it? Do you need to investigate, for example, what is fear? Or do you just need to know that there is fear?
I would say just know that there's fear. I suffered a lot of fear and social anxiety, and the analysis of it was a distraction. When I knew fear is fear more viscerally, especially this chakra, I found that whatever its cause, and I could not figure out why I had such intense fears. It kind of, I speculated maybe it was from the war, my mom, that kind of thing, but I found that wanting to figure it out was still trying to get rid of it. Yeah? When I just said, well, it is what it is. Now, having said that, it wasn't repressed. Let's say, if I suffered from PTSD and all this fear was repressed, and I was just masking it, then someone would have to help me and find therapy so that I can make it conscious. Once it was, for me, that wasn't the problem, so it was conscious. And then I found that actually thinking was an avoidance. And when I just went to the visceral feeling of fear and social anxiety, and if I abided here and here, kind of, and I just knew, oh, fear feels this way, fear feels this way, then I wasn't creating the conditions for more fear, but I was recognizing the kind of vipaka kamma of fear wherever it came. So I didn't find analysis actually that helpful. I didn't go, there was a tendency from Western culture to psychologize all these things, and it made sense if someone was repressed. But for me, that wasn't the case. It was very, very conscious. Mr. Lompo Sumeda would say, consciousness is the escape hatch. Just let it come out, welcome it. And that's where I think I got my best insights around what metta bhavana was. The metta bhavana was the attitude to fear. It was the attitude of goodwill towards the fear. So it wasn't a kind of dualistic metta, may I be well, may you be well. It was more an internal attitude to the very rising of, in this case, fear or anger. So it was like fear became conjoined with goodwill towards even ill will or fear or whatever. Then what I was putting into the mind actually was goodwill when the fear arose. Whereas before that I was putting in aversion to the fear. So you can see in terms of stream of consciousness, what's manifesting in the mind is goodwill, even if it's just acceptance. So I would welcome the fear. And that wasn't analytical. That was just a kind of Dhamma practice. Okay, yeah. So very nice to be with you, and I hope we meet again, and Happy New Year.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.